Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Legged Sportscast. A bit of a different lineup for you this week. We've had every combination of the forward line, haven't we? Over the course of the season. But Andy's once again away, sunning it in Ibiza. I think he's actually with good friends of his from the Adaptive Grand Slam.
Adaptive Grand Slam, yeah.
Yeah, so shout out to them again. If you want to check them out, go on to Andy's Instagram. I think there's a link up there for them, but they're a fantastic organisation that supports amputees like Andy and other people with different disabilities to still fulfil their ambitions from a adventure point of view. Do some fantastic stuff, and Ibiza is a perfect example of it. Just another shout out. We've got the Three Peaks Challenge coming up at the end of May. The end of May. It is the end of May. It's the bank holiday weekend, isn't it? So there's 2 days in May. We've got the first one on the last bank holiday that weekend, the Saturday for 24 hours. We will be attempting the Three Peaks Challenge. So for anyone who hasn't heard of the Three Peaks Challenge, we're doing the national version, or the Three Peaks from the 3 different countries, one in Wales, one in England, one in Scotland. We start in Ben Nevis, down to Scafell Pike, and finishing in Snowdon, attempting to summit and return down to the bottom. Who has a few questions about that? Summit each and return to the very bottom. So we must get to the bottom of Snowdon within the 24 hours. We will be, as myself and Andy were doing last year when we done the 4x4x48 challenge, the Goggins challenge. We will be doing it for the Sudulo Foundation. As per the money we raised last year, and again, a lot of the fundraising they do, it's a fantastic cause, particularly for those who have got roots in the inner city. So they support a lot of children in deprived areas in Manchester, in Liverpool, in London, buying them school uniforms, buying them PE kits, trainers, helping them to go on days out, and helping them to have a similar life to what some of us may have been fortunate to have when we were younger. Trying to bridge that gap between the classes, which is much needed in these days and times. So yeah, we will have a fundraising page coming soon, for those who are asking, and we will absolutely hammer the life out of it because it's for a brilliant cause. But believe me, the Three Peaks will hammer the life out of us as well. So we'll have plenty of footage going on during those 24 hours, so you can see the pain we're going through to try and raise some much needed money. Into the sport content.
I just say, by the way, that was a very decent intro about the challenge there, mate. Well,
right off the cuff as well, wasn't it? Right off the cuff. As soon as I started saying it, I thought I'm going to forget one of the peaks here and just start fumbling all over the place. But I thought it was all right there. Right, we're gonna go back to last weekend first of all. Obviously, it's the weekend. Or the football that's been over the last week, and certainly is coming in the last few weeks from a Premier League perspective, is about you guys trying to finally seal the title. And we will be talking a little bit about the race for Champions League, which, if we're honest, is probably the most exciting bit at the moment. I'm not saying for Liverpool fans it isn't exciting, because of course it is, but it's almost, as I say, it's a bit of an inevitability about it. We'll start before we get onto the Reds and the Champions League stuff, which is a bit more a bit more interesting. Everton's fixture against Man City at Goodison. I'll be honest, I was away last week. I did arrive back in Liverpool Airport just before the kickoff. Didn't make it to the match. But as per my podcast, the Across the Park one, I have had to go through the game, and I did manage to watch the game on the telly in the end, via the joys of international broadcasting. But I must give me, and I'll keep this quite short, to be honest. Not to disappoint Evertonians, but I'm fairly sure that my summary will be in keeping with everyone else's. I thought we accounted, I thought we done pretty well. I thought we accounted for ourselves well, but it's at least the first 65 minutes. I don't think there was much in the game at all. I think we spent a few opportunities, which, on other days we could have taken. I thought we give them a lot of problems, particularly from set plays. Tarkowski hit the post. I thought, I don't think there'd be much for Evertonians, certainly in the first 65 minutes, to be disappointed about. I do get the feeling now, and I think I've been slightly backed up a little bit by the performance against Villa, that they're starting to find themselves a little bit more again now, City. And I'm certainly not suggesting they're the City of 12, 18 months ago, because they're gonna take a while to go through the gears with some of the players that are coming in, but they are starting to me to look a bit more like a Guardiola City, and they seem to have a little bit more stability at the back as well. And I get the impression that they're just almost starting next season now. It's almost like this is their pre-season. They've obviously done quite a bit of business in January, and obviously don't want to piss on your chips, because you've got to, you have been the best side by a distance. But for the rest of the other teams, I'd be a bit wary about the way things are going at the moment. I get a bit premature, but any thoughts from you on City of the last few weeks? Does it look like to you like they're anything near, or they're getting closer to where they were?
Yeah, in terms of the form, I think they're second in the last 5 games in terms of form. You've got weirdly Wolves atop from the last 5 games. They've absolutely smashed at the back end of the season. I'm considering where they were a couple of months ago. But I agree with the City thing. I'm pretty sure you and Andy had mentioned once City had made those signings at the end of January. Can't remember whether it was you or Andy. They basically said, like, this is where they're getting ready for next season. So they kind of chalked off the season, put that down as kind of like a transition, put it down as a loss, whatever you want to call it. And then it's a case of, we may as well get a 6-month pre-season in. And obviously they got the World Club Championships, or whatever the new name is for it, or whatever. So that kind of eats into their actual pre-season. So if that's going to be happening, they need to be ready for next season, and no time better than the back end of this season to show we're actually, as you said, not where we were, but we're on track to get back to where we could potentially be. Some of the newer signings, but also some of the young lads. So obviously, Nico Riley has scored the issues, but scores a couple of weeks ago, got a couple of assists against Bournemouth. So I think it's Bournemouth. So he's looking to be quite promising. And as you were saying, like getting some of those newer lads in. I know that one of the signings isn't too happy with Pep. In terms of like not getting. I think he's had like the last 5 games he's been on the bench or something like that. I was reading. So obviously, yeah. So I don't know whether he's fallen out with Pep or he hasn't fit into the system straight away. It's one of those where it's like, well, you're young and you're a new signing, so I'm not going to just keep persisting with you. I'm going to just take you out the firing line for a little bit and then maybe see how the actual summer goes and the actual pre-season, maybe get them ready for the start of the next season rather than keep persisting and maybe dipping in form, dipping in confidence, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's the way he does it. I mean, in fairness, I think that's the way the top managers do it in general. They don't lead players in the team who they don't think are ready, and some managers prefer to send them on loan. Pep is the type of coach generally you'll keep them in the squads and he likes them training, and I think there's so many players down the years who've been like that with City, where they seem to have not been in the team for 2-3 months and they're sitting there. It's like they're rotting away, and suddenly they come out, play 5 or 10 games on the bounce, and they look like like new players again. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that. And I think you're right. I think the pre-season will probably tell him all he needs to know about whether they're going to fit his system, his style of play, etc. And then they'll probably come into their own. But not to dwell too much on City at this moment in time. I think it's still very much, let's see how it goes. But I think for me, they look like a team, as we've suggested, that are in transition. They look like a team over the last few weeks that are starting to find their identity again. It's obviously remains to be seen in the long term how they're gonna cope without the likes of Bernardo Silva, without the likes of Kevin De Bruyne. Kevin De Bruyne obviously is leaving. Bernardo Silva, you would imagine, if he doesn't leave this summer, will be moving on in the next couple of years just based on his age and stuff like that. And physically doesn't look like the player he was. they haven't got Haaland at the moment either. So, it is a City team that has lacking some of the players that have made them who they are. But just to go back to Everton, I mean, the big turning point for us was obviously Tarkowski going off injured. Michael Keane's come on. David Moyes got a little bit of criticism, or it was more questions around why he didn't tuck O'Brien inside and bring a fullback on. And I think Michael Keane has always been a player who's fragile on confidence. He struggled against the top sides. He struggled against some average sides, to be fair, but he generally struggles with movements, anything in front of him and behind. And I did feel a little bit for Michael Keane. I'm not a Michael Keane fan. It's pretty, most Blues aren't, but I'm particularly dislike him as a player. But as a person, that must have been really tough. He's not played many minutes at all in the last few months. To come into a game like that, which was, it was at a crucial time of the game, around 60 minutes where the game can go either way. To come at that point as a centre-half must have been tough. And clearly it was. And I think that was, without doubt for me, a turning point. City then made 2 changes just after that. One of them being Jeremy Doku, who was excellent when he come on. And the game was just spun on its head. And once City got the goal, and again, the goal, was following, a couple of mistakes from Michael Keane. And yeah, there didn't look to me any way back from that for us after that. But it wasn't, again, it wasn't a game for me where I come out of it being really disappointed. I think, if Tarkowski gets that header, or we score that header in the first half, and he manages to stay on and doesn't get injured, we may come away with something, maybe even a win. But again, I still think there was a lot of encouragement. We didn't look like a team who were just sitting in there waiting for our fate. We did have a go. We competed, and again, I just think it's another performance which makes me encouraged for next season, particularly if we can invest the way that we want to in the summer, and we can bring a few new faces in the challenge for those places in the first 11, because it's still a team and squad where outside of the best 12, 13, 14 players, there's not a lot of quality and depth. And that's something that Moyes will have to address alongside the turnover of players that's coming in the summer. And that's the last point I probably want to touch on Everton, because it's something that we spoke about at length on this week's podcast. We were fortunate to have Joe Thomas on, who's Everton's correspondent for the Liverpool Echo, and he went through player by player, almost like the release list, if you like. So we've got 15 players that we're going to be seeing the back of in the summer, either going back to their parent clubs or being out of contract. The most notable of those, Idrissa Gueye, Decore, and the likes of Neil Maupay, we're definitely going to see the back of. The lone players, Jack Harrison, it was an interesting one, because Joe Thomas felt that he might be a decent squad player to keep hold of if Moyes can get a little bit more out of him. I don't agree with that. But I think Idrissa Gueye and Decore are certainly the two ones that, we're keeping a keen eye on as Blues. I think Joe Thomas used an Andy Grant phrase where he said, look, Decore deserves his flowers. He's been amazing servant for the club and has come up with some massive goals. So, he's hoping that we can find a financial compromise with him to keep him as part of the squad, but to transition him into a squad player as opposed to a first 11 player. Similar with Idrissa Gueye in terms of wages, he's on big money, but he's a player who's clearly very happy at the club. And again, another player who's, for me, probably been one of the best signings we've made in the last 20 years, value for money, pound for pound. Obviously, he's had 2 spells at the club in between going to PSG, but he's just been a terrific player for the club. And I'd love to see him have another year, if only just to help the likes of Tim Rabunum, develop and try to learn from someone like Idrissa Gueye, who arguably has been one of the best in the business as a water carrier, a holding midfielder in the Premier League over the last 10, 15 years. So, yeah, interesting summer for us, and that's kind of where we are now. We're coming towards the end of the season, and we've got more than half an eye on what can we do in the summer, who are we going to keep, but more notably, who can we bring in. The last one, was Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It's kind of swung, back and forth in terms of, I think, Evertonians' wishes for Calvert-Lewin, Evertonians' expectations of whether he'll go, whether he won't. I think this injury is a really pivotal swing in the narrative, really, because I think there would have been some teams who were looking at Calvert-Lewin before this most recent injury, thinking this is a player now who's been fit for the best part of 18 months, 2 years. His injuries are maybe behind him now, and it's worth just taking a punt on him as a second option, as a backup. And I think some of the teams maybe in the middle or the top half of the Premier League may have looked at it like that. Now less so. It's another injury. It's another muscular injury that he's been plagued with throughout his career, and now there's a lot more risk around that signing. So does it now mean that we can go back to Calvert-Lewin and go, look, sign a 1 year, 2 year deal? You can't maybe demand massive wages anymore because one, you've not been a player that's been prolific over the last couple of years, but two, you're a player that has had a lot of injuries that the club has supported you with. And finally, it's maybe saying to him, look, we're probably as good as you can get now in terms of where we are as a club. We're obviously going into the new stadium, so there's going to be opportunities. So, yeah, Joe Thomas felt that it should be a player that we should look to retain if, again, the price is right in terms of the wages. So they're the three. I think Idrissa Gueye, Doucouré and Dominic Calvert-Lewin to keep an eye on. All three of them may not be there next season, but easily I think all three of them could be there. So yeah, that's about it from me on Everton. Musk, I don't know if you've got any questions.
Yeah, so in terms of the Calvert-Lewin one, what I was thinking about that, similar to what you've been saying about him being out for quite a while from this back end of the season. Not only that, though, like, start the season, he was probably thinking, can't be arsed fighting another relegation battle again next season and the season after. And I've had basically 3 seasons in a row where when I've been playing, it's all been on me and all that. But it seems to have changed since Moyes has come back anyway. There's less onus on that number 9. But also, by next season, you're hoping to be then getting a little bit closer to like the middle of the table. And because, as you just said there's not going to be as many clubs sniffing around him. I was thinking, like, could it even be like he gets some kind of incentivized contract instead, so that the onus is like more on him to stay fit as well? Because obviously you don't want to be paying out too much if he's going to be on the bench all the time. But when he is playing, he gets that added incentive of like, this is how my performance needs to be because I need to get X, Y, and Z amount of money or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a good shout. I think all of those options will be on the cards. And the great point that Joe Thomas made was, look, Everton have got a lot of things to address this summer, bulking up the squad, probably buying a fullback or two, buying a winger or two, maybe a bit more depth in the centre-back position. If there's any positions where we can just keep a player, it gives us one less thing to think about. And if you think about a fully fit Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which we have seen, quite a bit over the last 3 or 4 years. And I know David Moyes is a massive fan of Calvert-Lewin. He tried to get him at West Ham, and he's been vocal since he come in about, a player, what a player he could be if we can keep him fit. So yeah, I think if we can get the right contract on the table that works for player and works for club, I think it could be a good deal for both parties. But likewise, you could look at it the other way and go, maybe it's the right time for both parties to part ways and we move on. We try and find a replacement, or a number 9 that can give us what we're looking for. Which, if we're honest, we've not had since Romelu Lukaku. We've not had a number 9 who scores regularly, leads the line, does all of the things that you want a centre forward to do, and is not plagued by injuries. Calvert-Lewin's had, a purple patch under Ancelotti, and he's had, some decent periods under other managers, and he's led the line admirably at times, but he's not been a number 9 in the traditional sense in terms of regularly, getting the goals that we need. So it really is, one of them situations that I think can go either way. And I don't think either way I would be overly disappointed. I wouldn't be overly disappointed to hear that Calvert-Lewin has signed another contract, provided, as you say, that it was on the right terms. Equally, I wouldn't be overly disappointed if I heard that Calvert-Lewin's going to be leaving the club, because it would say to me that the club have obviously got, I'd like to think, other options lined up.
And has there been any sniffs of any other options from your end of your head out in at all?
No, I haven't. I mean, if anything, I've heard that there's a chance that maybe Beto leaves the club which, again, to a lot of people who are maybe not Evertonians, usually thinking, where's that? That's mad. He's got his out of this situation. And listen, I think he's become a little bit of a fan's favourite because you can't ask any more of him in terms of his work rate, his attitude in general. He seems like a really top pro in that sense. But again, it might just be one of them where if there are offers from Italy for 15, 20 million, that Moyes, I'm fairly certain Moyes looks at Beto and thinks, he's a decent backup. He's but I don't think he's the full package, and I think most Evertonians would admit that. He's very unpredictable, as your defence found out, both for the opposition and for us as well. We don't really know what we're going to get from him. So I haven't heard much in terms of who in a forward position we're looking to get in, which does suggest that maybe there's still a good chance that Calvert-Lewin signs another contract. But if anything, I've heard rumours that it might be Beto that leaves, and that might be just to free up a little bit more cash. Because the one thing that the dilemma we're faced with at the moment, there is a very small bit of cash that we need to get in before the end of June just to satisfy PSR for the end of this period. Yeah. Once we pass June, I think it's like 5-6 million, which again, you don't need to necessarily sell a bet or whatever to make 5 or 6 million, but the club might look at that and think, well, if we do sell someone for 20 million, we completely, eliminate any risk of PSR. And then once we get to the 1st of July, we're in a 3-year period where we've got a lot of wiggle room and a lot of opportunity as much as anyone would have to invest in the squad. So there is something that the club have got to do a little bit of business between now and the end of June to just stave off any risk of a breach. But beyond that, if once we're satisfied that we've cleared that period from July onwards, that we've almost got as close to a clean slate as you can have, because we've had 5 or 6 windows of very little activity. If anything, we've been selling more than we've been buying.
Yeah, and to be fair, every club's kind of doing whatever they can to make sure that they're making the most of what money they've got. Obviously, I put into the group yesterday that Liverpool could potentially lose another 4.5 million should Núñez make another start till the end of the season, which obviously...
Isn't it another appearance? Or is it a start?
No, it's another start. Yeah, so that's where we can probably still utilise him for certain games. And obviously we need to put him in the shop window. So he still needs to be getting, once we win the league, he still should be getting some kind of game time, just to kind of remind people of what he can be capable of. So what we don't want is that he rots on the bench till the end of the season, and then less teams are going to be kind of reminded of what he could potentially do for them.
Definitely. Well, moving on to use Musk, obviously, as I've said at the start, it's a bit of a weird period, I think, for Reds, because you could have won it against Leicester at the weekend, which we're going to talk about in a moment. We'll obviously move on to talking about the Arsenal result last night, but just start with Leicester. What is it? I mean, listen, you've got the job done. It wasn't pretty, and I think you'd be the first to say, like a lot of Reds, quite a lot of it, performances over the last couple of months have not been pretty, but the key thing is you've got the job done, and I don't think it could have been any more ironic, was it, in terms of the man who come from got the goal?
No, definitely not. It was just one of those games where I was like, the start of the day, we could have won it that day. Is Arsenal's results against Ipswich would have went our way, and then we win against Leicester. Like, there were potential plans of like, well, this could be the day. Then last night it could have been a day, but then obviously we're going to be looking towards the coming weekend in a little bit. But it just seemed to be one of those games on Sunday where it felt like we were knocking on the door. It felt like we were having loads of chances, not necessarily like loads of clear cut chances, but like their keeper made a couple of good saves. Stella had 2 posts in like very early on in the game, and I think it might be an Ndidi maybe blocked one of our shots as well. And it just felt like it's going to be one of those times where we're talking about potentially winning the league on that Sunday, and then it's gone from that to Arsenal have won and we've dropped points instead. And then obviously Trent comes on 71 minutes, and then within 5 minutes he nets one and then takes the top off and runs towards the fans.
I mean, I can't, before we go into the game a little bit more, that was the moment, wasn't it? And not just the moment. I think Trent coming on the pitch and the reaction of the fans, and what you make of that whole thing? Because I mean, I've spoke to so many Reds, and I think I would say most of them are on the side of the fence of, look, you said you're going to leave, stay away then, and you don't deserve this. But then there is a fraction of the fans who are going, look, he's still a player, and he's been a player who served the club as a professional, and he's been an outstanding player for us. Where do you stand on that, and where do you stand on, I guess, the reaction of the fans who boo them when they come on?
Well, to be fair, I did realise that they booed them until I saw on social media saying like there was like little pockets here and there. That would be, I think it was literally when
it wasn't all.
Yeah,
the fans,
yeah,
like.
exactly. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure like a lot of them got told to shut up straight away once that had happened that first time. Before the game, I was in the camp of like, if he's going, then we've got the players to kind of see us over the line, and we don't necessarily need him. But then in that game, he's shown that he can come on for 15 minutes and give us an extra 2 points by being on the pitch. And I think Carragher might have said it on the overlap this week, where he's like, while he's still a Liverpool player, or while anyone's wearing the shirt of your club, you've got to support them when they're on the pitch. And that isn't a Liverpool fan thing to do, to like get on the backs of your own players and stuff. And it was a small minority, but it did show it. As soon as the goal went in, those fans that were booing him when he came on, I'm pretty sure they would have been celebrating when he went over to the corner to them.
So Carragher did also say, and maybe I haven't heard this directly from his mouth, so I'm careful I'm not misquoting him. Carragher did also say he doesn't think Trent should be involved, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it was the week before last. He said something like, if he's told the club that he's going, then this is your time to like give Conor Bradley time to see how he gets on for the back end of the season and start to plan. Similar to what we were saying about City, planning for next year. If Trent's not going to be there and you know that the title's near enough done, then disregard him, put him to one side and just say, well, you're going. Like,
you're making your plans, we need to make our plans.
Yeah. No disrespect, we're not icing it out, but you've got to understand that we've now got to start building for next season. And if you're telling us that you're not going to be here, then we're going to have to start planning without you.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, in terms of the rest of the game itself, I mean, it was one-way traffic. I mean, you put up the stats in our little chat, obviously in prep for the. I mean, just to briefly touch on Leicester, they're a poor side. Them, I mean, I can't believe it seems that they're still making plans with Van Nistelrooy. I can't believe they haven't got rid of him already. I mean, we talk about transitions. They now know they're going to be relegated. It baffles me that they haven't sacked him already and allowed the managers to come in and just assess the squad at least to see who he wants to keep, start to get in people's ears, because you've obviously had Jamie Vardy who said, I'm leaving, and he's leaving because he hasn't been offered a contract. Another manager might come in and go, we could have got a seasons out of him and got ourselves back in the Premier League again. So it baffles me. I think it's one of the worst decisions I think a club have made after being promoted to the Premier League. Sacking someone like Steve Cooper, who's got a track record of keeping teams in the league, and obviously even if they do go down, of getting teams promoted, sacking him for a relative novice, and they've been so. I think they've won one game since he took over.
Yeah, and even in terms of like the lack of goals as well, it's what 9 games or 10 games now that they haven't scored. In the post-match interview, he did have Van Nistelrooy saying he's been quite positively about next season, making it seem like he's already had chats that he's happy to stick around a bit, happy to keep him. But then on the flip side, you've got Conor Cody. I'm not sure if you saw his post-match interview, but he was just saying like, yeah, the players weren't good enough, but as a club, nobody's doing anything right. So like from the people at the top, and that could even be like, why is this person still managing us when his record's probably even worse than what Cooper's was before he got off? And Connor Cody's been there and done that with a couple of clubs now, and he's seen certain clubs in turmoil and getting relegated and coming back up and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like this is all brand new to him. So he's probably seen some of the worst of the worst, and he's saying this situation at Leicester is absolutely dire.
Yeah, definitely, and it does speak volumes when you've got, as you say, someone like Cody who's speaking out. But yeah, I mean, if it's all right with you, we'll probably move past the Leicester game and just briefly touch on the Arsenal one last night, because that was the kind of next chapter. You know, how do Arsenal get on? It was a weird game that last night, because you obviously got an Arsenal team that I've got more than half an eye on Real Madrid next week. You've got a Palace team that have been in awful form, and I've got a semi-final coming up at the weekend. It was almost like who wanted to lose the game the most rather than who wanted to win the game the most. Clearly, Arteta wanted to get the result. He was, you know, as animated as I've seen him for a while on the touchline, but two brilliant goals from Palace, to be fair. And they nearly nicked it at the end.
Yeah, that first goal was such a well-worked, like, training ground goal, wasn't it? And the second one from Mateta, it was a great finish, but I'm not sure what the Arsenal, like, defensive outfit were doing there. Like, Saliba to lose the ball, but then I don't know if you saw, like, the positioning of Raya where he was. It was like he was playing as like a left centre-back rather than like a sweeper, which normally keepers do.
I don't know if you've seen the post-match, but Carragher did analyse it, and they were basically saying, look, they were showing some clips of recent Arsenal games and saying, look, that's something that Ray has been doing for a while now, where the left-sided centre-back goes to left-back. He goes in as the second centre-back and they're playing across the back. He said, but the minute the ball goes into Odegaard, there's no need for him to still be there. He needs to just drop back then. And obviously that was pivotal, as it was probably that few yards too far off his line for him to actually recover. But great finish from Mateta, and yeah, I mean, it now obviously puts the emphasis back on you guys, but makes that game a little bit easier for the fans to plan for, because now, you know, it's even a draw. That would be enough. And I mean, you talk about Spursy, it would be so Spursy for Spurs to actually go and get a result, because you never know what you're going to get from them. But I mean, look, it's been a long time since you've been beat I was saying that obviously you got beat by Forest, but it feels like an eternity since you've been beat in a game in the league that's had some meaning to it.
Yeah, and to be fair, you were saying there about it being Spursy. This is probably a game where the Spurs fans don't mind losing, because it means that their neighbours are coming second then, so it's nailed on that Arsenal aren't winning.
But they've also got their own European game as well.
Yeah, exactly. Spurs got their semis to be thinking about, so a couple of players get less minutes and all that kind of stuff. If I was Postecoglou, I'd be thinking, well, there's nothing for us in the league. I could still potentially get some silverware in this Europa League, so I'll just put all my eggs in that basket. Well, we were out last night to watch the game just in case. There was one lad in particular who wanted Arsenal to get beat, because he's going to Dubai like today, which means that he's not going to be there. So John Aspen, who did the run with his last year, he's going to Dubai with the family. So he was one of the only people in that pub that was like, it needs to happen tonight, because I'm not going to be able to see it on Sunday.
I mean, I don't know him as well as you, but he seems like he goes on as many holidays as Andy does, so there's always going to be a chance that he was going to be on holiday at some point.
Yeah, he gets about. And to be fair, he has missed a couple of big games because of it, but you know, you take the good with the bad. I think he'll be all right once he has a couple of pints and a little bit of sun. That'll be sound.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, I can't personally see. I mean, as you said, there's a few variables in there, not least the rivalry between Spurs and Arsenal, but also the fact that Spurs have got, you know, a genuine opportunity of winning a European trophy, which has been a long time coming. And Ange Postecoglou is clearly, you know, his form in the league versus Europe has just been night and day. So, yeah, I mean, we'll touch briefly on the Everton game before we move on to the Champions League stuff, because that's, I mean, yeah, we'll do that. I'll just briefly. So Everton have got Chelsea away at the weekend, the early kickoff. As I've just said, a lot of the priority or the focus now for Moyes is looking at the players he's got available in the squad, what those players can offer him. Another reason why I thought, it would have been a good chance to bring Patterson on the weekend, but I understand, given the fact it was at a crucial time in the game, he didn't want to do that. I'd be shocked this weekend if he didn't take the opportunity to put O'Brien back into centre-back, which is his natural position, see how he copes there alongside Branthwaite. And I said to Joe Thomas the other day, I think it's a good chance for Branthwaite as a player to demonstrate that he's got the capability to lead the back line, because he's been in that since he's been in the team. Branthwaite, he's pretty much played, I'd say, 95% of his minutes alongside Tarkowski, who's that natural leader. He's played in front of Pickford again, who's quite a dominant figure, behind Idrissa Gueye. So he's had a lot of players around him that kind of do a lot of the work for him. I think without Tarkowski, because Tarkowski's now been ruled out for the rest of the season, I think it's a bit of a test for him to see whether he can be that leadership figure in the back line. And I think other clubs who are maybe considering him as an option might be looking closely at these next few games and how he conducts himself. Because if you're talking about a player who's going to command a fee of 70, 80 million, which is what the club are maybe talking about, and if that's going to be something that other clubs are willing to pay, they don't want to pay that for a player who's going to need 2 or 3 seasons to become a fully fledged leader at the back. If you're paying that, you want someone who's going to slot in, who's going to be confident, who's going to be able to, lead as a future captain, which is what we see him as. But I do think he's almost been sheltered by the players he's had around him, not least Tarkowski. So that's one to keep an eye on. But yeah,
said that the other week, didn't we? We said that about when we didn't know whether Virgil van Dijk was signing. We were saying, like, is Kanate the person to step up? And it's in that similar kind of vein where it's like he should be, because he's being guided through, as you just said about Tarkowski guiding Branthwaite through. Kanate's always been guided quite well with Van Dijk, and then it's like, well, let's see what he's like when you take that massive influence away from him. And as you were saying the other week, Kanate has shown when he's with somebody else, he doesn't look the same kind of player. And as you just said there, Branthwaite's got a much bigger price tag than Kanate, in terms of, like, one, the potential that he's got, but two, you've got the English tax on it as well. That he is, well, if he wants to stay, then that's great. But these are the times where, if he is in the shop window, it's got to prove that once the lad to me right or to me left isn't there when he's normally there, I can step up and I can be the leader. And to be fair, when he played against us a couple of weeks ago, he did show that kind of quality, because there were certain times Pickford was saying certain things to him and he wasn't always agreeing with what Pickford was saying, which shows, like, I know that you're one of the senior players, but
bit of authority there,
yeah. I don't have to be a yes man just because I'm younger than you, kind of thing, which I thought was a really good quality in Branthwaite the other week.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's definitely an interesting one for the fans, for Branthwaite, as you say, personally. I'd like to see Patterson come in right back, because again, he's another player who, he's been plagued by injuries. He's still relatively young, but he's got a lot to prove. And I think if he can step up in the next, 4 or 5 games or whatever, and show David Moyes that there is that potential there, it might be another one less thing that he's got to worry about in the summer. I don't really see the value in rolling Ashley Young out again. We know what Ashley Young can offer. He's obviously getting on massively. If he is going to get another deal, it'll be for a year at the most. Coleman, I genuinely believe with Coleman, he has been fit over the last few weeks, that they just want to give him 20 minutes in the Southampton game and allow him to have as good as some farewell. He may even start him in that Southampton game, which I wouldn't be against. Then
he gets a standard ovation that he comes off.
Yeah, exactly. So I think either way, I think that's the plan for Coleman, is to give him minutes in that last game at Goodison. I don't see him playing any part in the other games before that. He may well play in the last actual game of the season against Newcastle away. But yeah, so therefore, I would be disappointed if I didn't see O'Brien start and Patterson. Apart from that, we might see McNeil come back in. He's obviously been coming off the bench since coming back from injury. It's interesting where David Moyes sees him playing. I don't personally see him as the number 10 that Dyche was trying to turn him into. I see his best position as being on the left, but that's the position that Iliman Ndiaye has occupied and occupied so well. I wouldn't mind seeing McNeil come in on the left and Ndiaye play as the 10, because that's where I think Ndiaye will eventually be, playing his football and will play his best football. So yeah, I think they're probably the most likely changes. I imagine Decore might come out if that's the case, in place of McNeil, with McNeil going to the left side and Ndiaye in the middle. But in terms of the game itself, I can't say I'm not bothered. Sounds mad. I'm obviously, I like to see a good performance again. I'd like to see us not just try and play for the draw, because there's no need to. That said, there's still, we talk about the position we're in financially. If we end up finishing 4 or 5 places higher up the league, we finish maybe 13th instead of 17th. Then that's a good few million as well, because that might be the difference between us having that buffer from a PSR perspective. So I'm sure David Moyes isn't naive to that, and he'll not just want to start rotating for rotating's sake. Chelsea have obviously still got a lot to play for in the league. They're still in a position where they can secure European football themselves. They have got European competitions coming up, but as you put in the notes, that they've got pretty poor side that they're playing.
Yeah,
you put 12th in the Swedish league, which sums up that competition. But it'll be an interesting one. I mean, the last time we went to the Bridge, we got absolutely torn apart by Cole Palmer. I think it was 5-0, but it was a horrendous performance. And I'm just looking forward to hopefully not seeing us be that bad and to compete a little bit more as we did the weekend.
Yeah, I think a lot of focus this weekend, not just like in Merseyside, but a lot of focus just in terms of the Prem is going to be all about Sunday, really, isn't it? Really? Obviously, I've put in the notes there, like, for people like me, obviously, I will have been, 4 months, something like that, when Liverpool last won the league with fans. We had a good time for the COVID one, but you couldn't really go out and celebrate. You weren't at the match when it happened. It was just a bit of a weird time to be even thinking about football for some people and all that. So Sunday's going to be big in terms of you're not just celebrating one league, you could be potentially celebrating 2. So for some of us, it's taking 2020 and this season and having celebrations on behalf of both of those achievements. So for example, last time we won, as I said, I was 4 months older. My dad was 30, and now I'm 5 years older than that. You know what I mean? So it has been a long time coming. So all we need is that 1 point. I think someone put on Twitter something along the lines of to make everyone happy, let's have a 5-5 draw, and Spurs fans will be happy that Arsenal haven't won. Everyone else gets a goal fest, and then Liverpool can still get the name on the trophy.
But do you expect any major changes to anyone you'd like to see come in the weekend? Again, it was hardly a polished performance against Leicester. Is there any players you think they could come in and make a difference? Does Trent start?
I don't think so. Again, until we know what he's doing, I don't think he can really start, because Slot's got to be kind of savvy, as I was saying before. He's got to be thinking about next year. We only need that 1 point. So, yeah, bring Trent on, because obviously Bradley's only just coming back from injury himself. He can't be playing full Wednesdays all the time. So I'm thinking that Trent came on the other day more for saving Bradley than to actually give Trent more minutes.
Yeah,
you've got to be managing players like that, especially if they're young and they're not used to that amount of game time and that intensity and all that kind of stuff. You don't want them to be scuppered for the summer and then start on the back foot for next year. I think maybe Jota might not start. I think that might be something that might happen. You might just mix up two of the left or the middle of those 3. Obviously, Salah's definitely going to start. midfield three's probably going to go unchanged, and he might put Robertson in. I don't know. He still doesn't really have a preference by the looks of things on whether it's Robertson or Shimikas. Shimikas had the last 2 games. Robertson obviously hasn't had the greatest of times when he has come on. But again, it might be one of those where it doesn't really matter. It's just a case of making sure that those 2 lads stay fit, and you just rotate for the sake of rotating. It shouldn't make that much of a difference, really. I think Gravenberch came out this week saying he thinks he's probably played a little bit too much. For a better word, I think he said something along the lines of, "I'm not used to playing week in, week out, near enough every minute of every game." I think that's just a polite little acknowledgement to the coach, really. Like, maybe you could rotate us a little bit more next season so we don't get ourselves burnt out. That could be one of the reasons why over the last 5, 6, 7 games it hasn't really clicked, because those 3 who at the start of the season were like firing on all cylinders and doing the business, they're probably just a little bit tired now. You haven't really got many options of rotation with maybe an Elliott or a Jones that would have happened last year. They haven't really been getting those kind of opportunities on the slot.
No, that's a fair point. I mean, and we did say that. We certainly mentioned that when it comes to the Champions League, didn't we? That maybe he had that opportunity in the Champions League and didn't necessarily appreciate that format allowed for more rest in anything than the other way around. But yeah, I mean, again, I think you would take this situation, wouldn't you, all day long? Some players moaning they're a bit tired or whatever, and you're getting results and whatever. Then you know you're being involved in 4-4s and playing great footy, and all the players being happy as they were sometimes on the clock, but maybe not quite getting over the line. So you've got to credit above all else the manager for doing what's needed to be done to get the results.
Yeah, exactly. And I've written in the notes there, like, we can't overlook the fact that there is another team involved on Sunday. Like, we're gonna be going there thinking, hoping, praying, whatever you want to say, about Liverpool getting the job done and getting the names on that trophy. But there is that other 11 players that are going to be wearing white that are standing in our way. So we can't just be tearing up. And I know that the players won't be. The players will be right up for it. The fans are going to be right up for it. It's not going to be like the Carabao Cup where some of the fans, some of the players will have been tearing up going, well, we just need to be here and the trophy's ours. I think everybody is going to be banged up for it on Sunday. And I think that's going to be evidence when the cameras are there in Anfield.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I expect that as well. One of my questions is going to be: is there going to be a degree in theirs? But I don't think that's probably the word. It's not like you need to win, otherwise X happens. It's all it's going to happen is it's just going to prolong it. And I think if anything, the players. I kind of think of what I'd be like in that situation. The players, I'd be thinking, I'm looking forward to this night out tonight. Let's get this done. Let's let's play with no fear. Let's go toe to toe with them, because there's. It's not like you're talking about a team here that could just take you apart. You're talking about a team that are pretty fragile themselves. I think if you go, as you say, full throttle, you haven't got the players haven't got to think about, preserving their energy for anything else. It's if you get this done here, it's done. The job's done. The party time, yeah. So I think it could be a bit of a romp on Sunday, to be honest.
Fingers crossed, mate. Yeah.
Well, not fingers crossed. I'd love nothing more than to spoil that party, even if it was just as a lady inevitable. Okay, but yeah, as I say, interesting. I hope he's have a good day. I hope Tottenham winning doesn't spoil it for you. But nonetheless, I'm sure you'll get it. As I say, I'm pretty sure you'll get over the line. Just a brief nod, obviously, to the places below you now, though, because it's probably, it is about as exciting a Champions League race as we've seen for a long, long time. You've got five clubs that have all got as good a chance as any to some extent. Obviously, Newcastle being in the box seat. Forest just look very vulnerable to me now. I know they got that winner, Tottenham, but he crawled over the line against Tottenham.
Yeah.
Tottenham, threw the kitchen sink at them. Should on or could on another day have beat them. Forest, being as they have this season, were fairly efficient in taking the chances. But, it got the look to me like it's going to be heartbreak for Forest, and it could be even worse because they could very easily find themselves in 7th, which is potentially Conference League. So
yeah, and the thing is with Forest is they've been overperforming them for what everyone was expecting. Obviously, no one was expecting them to be up there, and then he's just been plodding then of being in that position over and over. And now it's getting to the business end. I don't know whether some of their players might be like, "Oh shit, it's happening," and some of them might get overexcited and kind of have that catastrophe theory where you kind of go overboard a little bit. Or you've got some players on the other side that are just going to be filled with nerves because it's well, we're slowly starting to slip into more of those 4th, 5th, and 6th, and even going into 7th. You only need to lose a game. To be fair, Villa's goal difference is shocking for a team that are up there. I've just had a little look there. They're only on +5, so that's a point in itself, isn't it? Really, at this time of the season, they're not making
all
up
the other teams,
those
all
goals.
the other teams got the upper hands on Forest, haven't they, goal difference wise?
Yeah, exactly. So again, it could just go down to something as simple as a couple of extra goals throughout the season. Which again, as we were saying the other week about is this league not good and all that kind of stuff. I think this kind of thing shows besides the relegation battle that's being done for a while now. This top 5 kinds of Champions League spot spit, that's been turning up and down for the last good few weeks now, where City were 5th the other day. You've got that one win, they go third. Obviously, they got, Forest have got a game in hand and stuff, but you'd rather just be in that position.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, you even had Bournemouth that were in the mix, probably 5, 6 weeks ago. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think outside of that, the top 2, which let's be honest, the difference in the top 2 is just been Arsenal have just drew too many games. You take, you convert 4 or 5 of them draws into wins, and it is used neck and neck, but they just haven't been ruthless enough, in finishing at times. But I think just going briefly back to Forest, I think the two things that stick out for me is similar to what we were talking about with Liverpool. That same 11 is pretty much played all season. They've had a couple of players that rotated in and out, but no more than that. It's pretty much been that same 11 all season. And the thing that Nuno's had up his sleeve is he's changed from a back 3 to a back 4 from time to time, which is through some of the opposition. Chris Wood's obviously scored a lot of pivotal goals, but they pretty much had that same 12 or 13 players that have rotated all season, and they look a team now who are really getting tired. I mean, they had no ideas against us, and they looked leggy against us. They've got the early goals against Tottenham, but again, very physically looked like they were struggling. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the interview, Harry Toffolo at the end of the game.
No.
He basically just saying that he was struggling with cramp from 50 odd minutes. And the sports scientists give them this pickle juice. It's meant to be really good to get rid of cramp, and it gets rid of it really quickly. So you're only meant to have 1 or 2 of them. Harry Toffolo ends up having 6 of them because it wasn't getting rid of it. And he said, I feel like I'm going to throw up now.
Yeah, I'd imagine that for me.
Out his pickles. But that kind of sums it up. You've got a player after 60 minutes who's got cramp. But then the other one, and this has been used as a bit of a compliment for them, they've kind of got a squad, Forest, of players who've been cast away from bigger sides, and generally
points to prove.
Yeah, they got a point to prove, and I think that's worked for them. But now you get into the business end of the season, they're also the players that fell short for a reason. They maybe didn't step up on the big stage. They weren't, every time it comes to it in terms of, look, you need to play against these top sides, you need to do this, we need to win the final, not just get to the final. They are the squad. It's got a lot of those types of players in it, and maybe that's going to be a factor as well. You've got Newcastle, who obviously off the back of a massive cup win, they're going to have that confidence that they can get over the line. Obviously, Chelsea have got a squad, although they're young, littered with some match winners. Cole Palmer is a world-class player. You've got Villa, who've done really well in the Champions League. So the teams that are sniffing around them have got a lot more about them. Even the managers, the Unai Emery's, maybe not so much Eddie Howe, but they've got managers who've been around top sides if they haven't managed them themselves. And I don't know. I think that might end up being a factor in the end as well for Forest. The season falls short.
Yeah, I do think out of the teams that we've mentioned, they're probably the ones that are going to slowly dip. I know we've only got a few games left anyway, but you might just slowly slide a little bit further and further down while the others are starting to gain momentum where those players know how to deal with, as you were saying there, some of those players won't know how to deal with it from Forest, but those other teams probably know how to get themselves over the line, put like that extra 5-10% in and all that, while maybe Forest are going to start running on empty.
I would suspect so, yeah. Right, just moving past that, one last football story which you put in, which is a great shout, is obviously what I briefly mentioned before, Jamie Vardy announcing that he's leaving Leicester. I was surprised that he's not retired. He's 38, by the way. Apparently he's going to be going over to the MLS, I think, but the stats you put in there are pretty remarkable, really. Obviously not all in the Premier League, but 496 appearances, 198 goals. I mean, he must be a little bit gutted he hasn't got to 200, but 69 assists, which again is, you've got 270 goal contributions there in less than 500 games, which is a goal contribution every other game, which is phenomenal stats, really. In England international, for someone who's come from the depths of non-league to play at that level, to play 500 games at the top level, obviously a few of them in the Championship, is a remarkable career.
Yeah, definitely. It's a proper like Roy of the Rovers type thing, isn't it? Where it's like, it's things that a kid can dream of when you get to a certain age. You go, oh, my football career's over. I'll just play a little bit here and there. And then he's just proven that if you do the job, you can just slowly work your way up through the leagues. And don't forget, he's still got a few games to get those 2 goals. But unfortunately for Leicester, he couldn't hit the barn door at the moment.
Yeah, the team can't get one along, putting a couple on the play for him.
Yeah, but great career for Vardy. And I even said when that news came out, one of the kids in work had said, like, oh, Vardy's leaving Leicester. And I said, is it because he's retiring? And he went, no. It hasn't said anything about retirement. It just said he's not going to stay at Leicester. He probably can't be asked with the whole transition up, down and all. Like, probably just wants a couple of years where he can just properly enjoy his footy, maybe get, as you just said, a little bit of a different lifestyle and all that kind of stuff, and see out his football career and style.
Definitely, and good luck to him. As you the last point you put there, a maverick pre-match routine, which is almost a nod to where he come from, like pub footy, really. Slamming Red Bulls down him and all that, and smashing his head against the wall, and all. It's just like getting himself up for it, old school. But to still be playing.
Snuzz.
Yeah, a few snuzz in the gum and stuff. But as I say, fair play to him. As you said, he's shown that anyone who's in non-league who believes they've got something about them, a bit of an X factor. In his case, it was his pace, wasn't it, and his kind of composure. Then you have got a chance. Just briefly switching to boxing before we finish. Obviously, all eyes were on the Whittaker Cameron rivalry last week. Following their first fight, which ended in a controversial draw. I mean, first and foremost, as a lot of people have said, you've got to give credit to the first round performance from Whittaker, which was outstanding. He's got his critics, clearly an outstanding talent. More famous almost for the showboating than his boxing has been so far. But that first round was excellent. Technically, the speed. It was an almost flawless performance in that first round, and obviously he's ended up getting what some people have called controversial knockout, but it was inevitable that the Cameron was going to be leaving the ring whether in a TKO or KO fashion. But yeah, what did you make of the performance before we talk about the reaction and the other stuff that went with it?
I think it's the kind of performance that he needed, because we said on the show in the past that, as you were saying, his showboating kind of is the thing that people will talk about, and he's kind of sometimes gone a little bit overboard with that showboating, and it goes into that kind of like bit of a disrespectful edge towards his opponents, and that's the bit of it that I didn't really like. Obviously, you can showboat. We grew up watching people like Naz and people like that, so showboating was one of the reasons you tuned in and watched in. But it's kind of just getting to the level where he needed to maybe put the brakes on that and show what he could offer. And I think Saturday was definitely a time where he showed why he was an Olympian, why he was getting the big bucks when he first signed to Boxer and all that kind of stuff. And this is the kind of performance that hopefully for him will take him into the next stages and higher ranked opponents and prove that he can mix it with the best.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, following his victories went over the corner, and he's apparently spat, at what's his name, the coach.
I didn't see it. I've seen him kind of shouts and stuff. I didn't hear that he potentially spat at him or whatever. Yeah, it might have been that he's shouting like that.
Yeah. But again, I think what a lot of people have pointed to, certainly the pundits and ex-fighters or whatever, just said, look, that's not in keeping with the sport. Whatever fashion you win a boxing match, you go and show respect to your opponents. You respect your opponent's corner. He clearly, took the chance to do the opposite and to say to them, well, this is what your outcome is here, etc. And I think that, as you pointed out, and I think that's the most significant thing, you only have to watch his conference to show his post-fight conference to see how much emotion there was, and how much, I guess, vented frustration and all that there was behind the scenes, and how much he felt that was a significant victory for him, and how much it meant to him. I think he was quite quick to apologise for the way that come across, and I'm sure he'll learn from that. But yeah, I think, as you're suggesting, I think it was a reflection of how important that fight and how significant he knew that victory was, and how important he probably valued the manner of the victory as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first fight was when we were over in Spain, wasn't it? And we were kind of saying, first of all, it was a shock of how the fight went, but we were saying, like, has Whittaker done that because he was down on the cards and he's trying to pull a fast one and all that? And then obviously he got loads of, he said in that post-fight conference, got loads of hate online and all that kind of stuff. So he was dealing with like bad mental health problems because of it. He's then said he's turned to God and this church and all that as well. But all of that has probably built up, and then came out in that split-second moment once he's won that fight. Then he's had to rein it all back in again. So his emotions are everywhere, and then he breaks down in tears in that post-fight conference as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, without doubt. And again, I think I'd just like, as we've alluded to, the focus to be on that performance, and as you say, that to see him now step up and face the opponents that he should have been facing at this stage of his career, rather than having to take a step back because of the previous fight. Moving on to this weekend, obviously all eyes, without doubt, are on the huge family rivalry between the Benns and the Eubanks. It's, I think from listening to TalkSport and reading stuff, and it seems to be a fight from a pundit's point of view that divides a lot of people. I think, it's fair to say, if you just look at their records, it should be Eubank and Eubank is the favourite, but it should be Eubank that is a massive favourite. But I think the weight is playing a part in terms of, people worried about the cuts for Eubank, all of the various different terms they've got in around the hydration clause and everything, which is going to slightly play into Benn's favour, being the person who's more comfortable at gaining the weight rather than keeping it off. Obviously the family rivalry is a huge factor here, and maybe that creates a bit more needle. I'm with you on the points you've made, and I'll allow you to verbalise them. But for me, it's Eubank's to lose, and it's how he approaches this fight and how he deals with the hype and not allowing it to become a war.
Yeah, and we've already seen, like, Eubank's had these big fights as well. So, like, for example, when he's fought Liam Smith, for example, he's had these like big arena fights where he's the headliner at main events and all that. Whereas Benn hasn't had a lot of that. He's had a good rise. He's had some good performances, but then obviously some of his better performances that then came into question because he then had the adverse findings. And it's like, did he have that power because of whatever he might have had in his system, the eggs, so to speak? But in terms of this fight itself, I think Eubank will probably be more comfortable with the occasion, because he's been there and done that, and he'll be more comfortable in the ring as well. I think Benn probably would have to start well and kind of try and do what he can earlier on, because I do think as the rounds go on, I think Eubank will probably offer a little bit more in terms of technical aspect and how he deals with the latter rounds.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with anything you've said. I think certainly from a synopsis of how I expect the fight to go, that wouldn't be far off it. I think the biggest factor for me is the psychology of it. I think, you talk a lot in boxing, and we've just mentioned it with Whittaker and everything about the, how the antics outside the ring play a part in what goes on in the ring. And I think the way the Eubank has conducted himself, whether you call it classless in terms of the egg stuff and all that, but it just feels to me like he's won that battle out of the ring. He's had them off on so many occasions in terms of like just making a mockery of Benn and Eddie Hearn, which Eddie Hearn's seasons as a promoter. He's been in so many of those big fights, but it's been amusing to see how easily Eubank has kind of dismissed them and made a bit of a dickhead out of him at times. And I just think he's just going to, as you say, he's going to handle the occasion. I think there just seems to be a lot more tension and emotion with Benn. And I think that's probably going to boil over and make him even more tired when he gets into the ring. Whereas I think, Eubank's coming in, even though he should be the person who's under a bit more pressure because he's the favourite and he's the bigger man and all that and the more experienced fighter, I feel like he's just taking on the pressure so well. Whereas it just feels like it's a bit too emotional for Benn, and I think that'll be the biggest factor. But I don't disagree with you. I think Benn will fly out the traps and try and get inside Eubank and try and trouble him and try and keep the fight to a pace. But I think if it almost by doing that as well, it'll give Eubank a chance to smother him and use a bit more of his bigger physique. So yeah, I don't see, unless Eubank loses his head somehow, that Benn wins the fight.
Yeah, I think literally since the first face-off, Benn looked like an angry head in the ring, didn't he? And he was the one that was like giving it loads and basically shouting in his face, spitting at him as he's like shouting and all that. And then when he's kind of done the little bit of press in the stadium, it was him shouting while Eubank's just kind of like standing and kind of seemingly taking it, like showing basically, I'm not asked what you're saying. Like, all of this doesn't really matter to me because when we get in that ring, I'm going to show you what's what.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it remains to be seen, but I think we're both agreed that it's probably going to be a Eubank victory. There is a 2-fight deal, so it's almost saying we'll see the fight again. So hopefully it is relatively competitive and we're not just seeing another fight for the sake of it. But yeah, that 2-fight deal, I'm sure, will be executed by either fighter if he ends up winning it. But certainly one to keep an eye on, and definitely one that we'll both be tuning into. But yeah, that's about all we got time for. I mean, we've went over a lot more than we normally do, an hour 10. But obviously a lot of Liverpool chat, quite a bit of Everton chat at the start as well. But hopefully you've got to the end. If you haven't, then you'll be hearing this anyway, so it doesn't matter. But listen, enjoy your weekends, everyone. If you're a Red, please, enjoy it responsibly. Hopefully you do get the result that you want. I'm not saying I'll be hoping for that, but yeah, I hope you all have a good time. Catch us all next week, and yeah, see you soon.